I've made a few buildings now where the materials were either free or close to free. And I had this thought, I wonder if you could build an entire house just with free stuff. So I thought I'd go around this, using this as an example, and point out what I got for free and how I got it. So I'll start with the easiest things and work my way through to the hardest things. So the easiest things by far are doors. Doors are really easy to get hold of. Builders take these out of like renovations all the time and typically just throw them in a skip. You can find them outside development projects. I got this one from the dump. You see them online sometimes. The great thing about this is quite an old door, and therefore it's made from like native timber, hardwood, really good quality. If you were to buy that in a shop, it wouldn't be cheap. Even the wood to make this would be pretty expensive. For the most part, people are just going to unscrew these and kind of throw them out. So the likelihood of you getting the kind of surround with the door is small. Although I have had that a couple of times. So it's something to look out for if you are getting a door. See if you can get the surround as well. The next material is windows. Windows are so easy to get hold of, maybe even easier than doors. The problem is transportation can be a bit of an issue. This window, I mean, anything bigger than this, it gets to be a bit of a struggle because it won't go easily inside a van or something. So then you end up needing a trailer, or you might need two people to lift it onto a trailer or something like that. So it can get a bit tricky. But most of the time, people just want to get rid of windows. I find it kind of amazing, really. This is, you know, it's a single glazed window, but it's really good quality. You know, it keeps the water out. It's got two latches on it. It works. It, you know, shuts nicely. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, pretty expensive from a shop, or, you know, free from the dump or anywhere else. So I think windows are a great thing to have. And obviously, like doors, you've got to kind of collect them up. And that's kind of a bit of a problem, I suppose. If you don't have lots of space, you've got to sort of start saving them up and get a bit of a collection going before you can even start designing your project. So, you know, you do have to be patient, but I think it's worth it in general. If you think that you're going to build something, it's worth kind of looking around, keeping your eyes out for windows. And if you see a few, just bringing them back to wherever you live, if you've got somewhere to store them. And then once you've got a few, then you can design your project around whatever windows and doors that you have. Cool. Since I'm in here, I feel I should mention this, since this was another thing I got for free. This came from the dump. I bought the tap new, but the basin, I decided not to. You can actually, the taps, there were plenty of taps at the dump as well. But yeah, I just felt like I wanted a new tap on it. But things like basins, sinks, anything from a kitchen or a bathroom is really easy to find for free. The reason being, those two rooms, the kitchen and the bathroom, are easily the two most renovated room within a house. So quite often people will buy a house, move in, and just gut whatever's there. And there's usually nothing wrong with that kitchen, people or bathroom. People just don't like the look of it. So either the dump is a good place to go, or just looking in skips. I mean, I tend to ask. I've done that before. If you walk past a building site that has a sink in it or whatever that you want, if you ask the builders, half the time they'll be so happy to get rid of it because they'll be freeing up space in their skip. And if you ask, maybe they'll say like, oh yeah, we've also got, I don't know, a load of cupboards or whatever else it is in the house, and they're going to be more than happy to kind of get rid of that and let you take it for free. These pavers I got for free. I ended up sort of deliberately leaving a gap between the cracks and tried to make a bit of a feature of it, but I think it looks okay. I was chatting to a woman in a shop, and I just said to her like, oh, you know, the pavers are kind of quite expensive. And she said, well, you know, it depends what look you're going for, but we have like a huge pile of them that have got cracks on them if you want them for nothing. So, you know, it's funny, isn't it? You just get talking to people, and then if you tell them that you're looking for something cheap or free, it's amazing what you can get. And there's a lot of other materials like this, like bricks you can get for free really easily. I find bricks, it depends if people are building with bricks, but in England, where everything is brick, every time someone does an extension or they change an internal room, it's going to mean smashing bricks down, and then those bricks will get thrown out of the house. A lot of the time the mortar will just come off quite easily, or even if it doesn't, it might take a bit of a whack to get it off. But bricks are something that I've always found very easy to get hold of. This is roofing material. I'm just using it as a kind of wall here in an outdoor shower area. It's corrugated iron. It's been painted with some sort of, it's a factory coated paint, so it's not going to rust. This is actually a pretty decent quality, and I got it for $5 I paid for it, which is $3 American, so kind of almost nothing. This is a really good material. One of the things about using it, well, for a wall like this, it's fine. If you were using it for a roof, obviously you've got to deal with the holes that would have been put in there on the previous roof. So you're looking at holes every that much, every 600 or 2 foot, or whatever their spacing is for the purlins they've got on the roof. But with it being as cheap as this, if you did want to use it for roofing material, you could easily kind of overlap those holes, or you could glue something over it. There's plenty of ways to get around these little holes. There's not loads of them. But for this wall, in this situation, in a shower, it's fine. I think this is actually a pretty good material, for cladding. I've never actually used this as a roofing material but using it for an external wall, to me, makes quite a lot of sense. I'm using plywood as a finishing material here, so the ply is running down here, and I've just nailed these onto the wall studs in order to hold the whole thing firm onto the walls, and then also to cover up any gaps between the two bits of ply. So that's a kind of fairly cheap way of building. Getting hold of ply for free is actually quite tricky. There are ways of doing it though. One way is there are charities involved sometimes in getting rid of waste material. So they'll go around, and when building sites have ordered too much ply, they'll take that back, and then they sell it for like less than half of the price that you could buy it in the shop. So I've done that before. I've used that service. Another thing that people do is, if you look out for places that use ply but only for a short period of time. So a good example of that is I used to get ply from a place that used it as hoarding. So I presume they do this everywhere, but in the UK they do it anyway. When they're building like huge lots of houses, they cover the whole site with these kind of plywood hoardings, just so people can't get into the building site, and they then usually paint those. So that ply has been out in the rain for like 6 months or a year, or however long it takes for that building project to happen. But because they paint it, typically there's nothing wrong with the ply, and for them it's just a waste product. They're just going to take that once the building has finished. They're just going to take all that ply and just dump it in a hole in the ground. And so that's plywood that you can pick up that's pretty reasonable quality, and you can get it for very little money. The other way of getting ply is to go down to someone that's actually sort of taking something apart, and I have seen that online a couple of times where people are saying like, oh hey, there's this shed or there's this garage or whatever on my property and I don't want it, you can have it for free. And what they're after is someone to just sort of take it apart piece by piece. So that's a way of doing it as well, if you've got time to go and do that sort of thing. For this job, when it came to the construction lumber, I actually paid for it. So I bought these, but they're rough sawn. So, most construction lumber has got those smooth edges, and it's manufactured that way just because it's easier on the hands for people to move around on building sites. This is rough sawn, it's got sharp edges, and it's a bit sort of, I don't know if it's splintery, but it's definitely rough. This is quite a bit cheaper, and that was good for this project. But, you can get this kind of wood for free. In fact, you can get any kind of construction lumber for free. I think the best way to do it is to look out for people that want to take a building down, and you're ripping it out for them. The difficult part of that, I suppose, is the time, and you also need like a trailer to put all the wood in, and then you need to denail it. All of that stuff is going to have nails in it. You do get charities. Again, I've seen that where charities take down buildings sometimes and then sell the timber. The difficulty is that I suppose it's not, this stuff isn't massively expensive anyway. So a lot of the time if you're in a rush with your project, you're like I am typically, I just think, oh, I'm just going to go and buy it. But I suppose it's a good idea generally just to keep your eye out. I've seen a couple of things where, particularly like farms and things like that, where they've got huge barns and, they'll put something up saying, barn free, just come and take it. Usually it's completely unusable as a barn, as in the roof's gone, the whole thing's sort of falling to bits. But quite often it will have a decent amount of wood in it that would be good enough to build with. And so it's just a question of going to those kinds of places and looking through and sorting out what's usable, what's not, and saving it that way for a project later down the line. I'm too disorganized with that. And so for most of the time, I end up actually paying for this. But you know, if you've got time for it, I think it's a good option. In terms of cladding material, I'm not doing much with this building just because it's very basic and cheap, and I'm just using these rough sawn bits of 1x4 down here. But you could use something like roofing battens down here. You know, you'd put house wrap on first, then put your battens, and then put cladding material. And cladding material, it's a kind of probably one of the hardest things to get for free, because when it's ripped off most buildings, it's just quicker and cheaper for people to either bulldoze it down or tear it off. Here you can find cladding that's come off buildings, but because someone has had to go around and carefully take it off, there is a cost to it. So you can get stuff like cedar, or you can get stuff like weatherboard, you know, where, or shiplap or whatever it's called, where the cladding is set like this. And it looks nice, but there's a small cost to that. The other way of doing it for free, again, it's finding places where people are taking down old houses, or they're taking down old garages, or whatever it is, and you have to do the kind of deconstruction work yourself. So you have to pull the boards off carefully, pull the nails out. But you know, I think it's probably, you know, if you've got the time, it's worth it, because you end up with a really nice product then, and a nice look to your building, and the investment is really your time rather than money. The first few buildings I made, I did everything with screws. The good thing about screws is if you make a mistake, it's pretty easy to undo them and take everything apart, put it back together again. But the cost of screws really do mount up when you're making several buildings. And so I started looking into it, and I started using nails. Nails are really, really cheap. And I quite enjoy using just a hammer and nail. It's easily the cheapest way to do things. You know, when you think about, say if you were to use nails but using a nail gun, you know, either you've got the batteries, the nail guns are quite expensive, you've also got the gas canisters that go inside them, so they're not cheap. I mean, there's the other option where you use a compressor, so you've got, you know, your pneumatic nailer running through to a compressor. I mean, if you know someone that's got one and you can borrow it for free, then great, that's probably the best way to go. But if you don't and you're looking at investing, just a very simple hammer and nail is, in terms of cheapness, it's going to beat anything. And yeah, it's a little bit slower, but I quite like it. So I don't think I'm ever necessarily going to go out buy a a battery-powered nailer. I'm perfectly happy with this, and it's definitely the cheapest way to do things. One of the things I didn't get around to talking about is Earthships, where people are doing things like taking tyres and filling them full of clay. And the reason I haven't talked about that is because I don't have any experience of it. You know, to make an Earthship where you're taking those materials that you get for free, you need a lot of manpower. You need a lot of people there packing out clay into tyres, and all of the construction that I'm doing is by myself, so I need it to be sort of easy for just one person. So that's why I haven't talked about that. But I hope you got something from it. I hope that you can get out there, build your own projects, and hopefully find some free stuff. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you next week.